Hi, I'm John Fink, Product Manager at Trijicon. Today we're going to walk through the process of mounting a scope and what it takes to properly mount a scope. So I've got my rifle secured and leveled here, in a vise. So, as we go through this process, it's going to stay stationary. But one of the first things I'm going to do is clean this surface off with rubbing alcohol. And this just ensures that, any grease, debris, or everything is completely cleaned off of this surface. I've already inspected the screw holes to make sure that we don't have anything residual down in there. If I do ever happen to notice anything in the mount holes, that's when I will run a Q-tip with rubbing alcohol into those. So step one now is going to be to secure our bases to the rifle. So for that, this requires a T15 or Torx 15 head, and I've got my Torx wrench set at approximately 17 inch-pounds of torque. And before I snug that rear one down, I'll go ahead and bring this front one to near the same tightness. So you've heard the click there, so now you know you're sitting at that 17 inch-pound. So everything looks good there. Now I'll jump to the rear base and secure to the same settings. So great, there we have it. Now we've got our bases secured. Now, critical part is leveling the rifle. So on this flat surface, I'm going to place my bubble level, and we're going to bring this rifle to where that bubble is sitting perfectly level. So now that we have that, we know the rifle, is level here. So now obviously I'm not going to be able to leave that level on during the mounting process. So I'm going to attach this level to the barrel. So in the one that sits on the barrel, you've got a little micro adjustment here that you can really true that up. So now that I've got my two bubble levels sitting, completely level, I can go ahead and remove this, and now we're going to add the rings. So the Trijicon rings, as I mentioned, very durable, very strong. These are secured with a 1/2 inch drive. And for starters, I'm just going to set this towards the middle. We may need to make a slight adjustment to these, as you're going to want these sitting, roughly at the midpoint in between the adjusters and the objective lens, the adjusters and the ocular lens of the rifle. So on each of these now, right now I'm checking for, my eye relief, and I want the back of this ocular lens roughly with the very back of the tang on this model 700. So I'm going to need to slide this forward just a little bit to give me that amount of movement. So I'll move that up into the next slot. Okay, so now we're properly adjusted for eye relief. The back of the objective lens is right there at the back of the tang, and through experience I know for my eye, my length of pull and setup, that's where the eyepiece needs to be. Now I'm going to come back in with this level, drop it on top of the scope, and bring it back into the scope back into level. I'll check that with my front bubble to make sure it hasn't moved, and indeed it is right where it's set. So everything is plumb and true at this point. Now I will set the ring back into place. And then next we're going to tighten these, again using my torque wrench, to 17 inch-pounds. Now if you don't have a torque wrench, it's important to note that you're just going to tighten these down hand tight, okay? Don't over tighten it. You can risk breaking a screw head, and if you do that, then you've got a bit of a mess on your hand to get those taken care of. But as I tighten these down, I will alternate them, okay? So I'll do kind of a crisscross pattern on the front, crisscross pattern on the back, And before I snug everything down, I'm going to bring them down to approximately hand tight, right before the torque wrench is ready to break or click. Now, another thing I like to do before I really start to tighten these down is I want to make sure the gap in between the rings, it is approximately sitting in the same place. And of course, always checking to make sure that you're staying level. And because, I have not tightened the scope down, I did move the scope a little bit. So we'll bring the scope back to level, double checking against the front, and everything corresponds there and is correlating to one another. So now that I'm here, I'll continue with the tightening down process. And this is a point where you really need to be careful, because if you over tighten one side versus the other, you will cant the rifle or count the scope in the rings, and come out, the reticle will not be completely vertical up and down, or the horizontal completely flat as you shoulder the rifle. So there you have it. Now we've got the scope mounted to the rifle. It's secure. Everything's plumb and true. Now we're ready to take it to the range and sight it in.